an independent editorial defense analysis focused on Australia's strategic environment.
The vast red expanse of the Woomera Range Complex in South Australia has long served as a quiet observer to the evolution of aerospace warfare. But the dust settling over recent testing activities signals a divergence in strategic logic. It is not merely technological progression. While the desert silence is periodically broken by the roar of scramjets and rocket motors, a more profound friction is occurring within the corridors of Russell offices in Canberra. This friction is not generated by the physics of high Mach flight. It is generated by the collision of two competing imperatives within the Australian defence apparatus. One imperative seeks immediate, proven lethality through established alliance channels. The other demands the cultivation of a sovereign industrial base capable of sustaining high-intensity conflict without external reliance. The trajectory of Australia's hypersonic ambitions, specifically the interplay between the domestic innovator Hypersonix launch systems and the American giant Raytheon, serves as the primary case study for this systemic tension. At the heart of this analysis lies the operational requirement for deep strike capabilities. Capabilities that can survive the dense integrated air defense systems proliferating in the Indo-Pacific. The recent attainment of initial operational capability by the U.S. Air Force for the Hypersonic Attack Cruise Missile, or HACM, presents Australian planners with a seductive, albeit expensive, solution. As a scramjet-powered munition developed by Raytheon, the HACM offers a tangible product, one that integrates with existing platforms like the F/A-18F Super Hornet and eventually the F-35A Lightning II. From a pure capability acquisition standpoint, the logic appears sound. Accessing the HACM production line through the AUKUS Pillar 2 framework would theoretically allow the Royal Australian Air Force to close the lethality gap rapidly, bypassing the arduous developmental cycles associated with indigenous programs. However, relying exclusively on this procurement pathway introduces a critical vulnerability regarding supply chain security and magazine depth. The unit cost of high-end imported hypersonic munitions, estimated to be in the range of $4 to $5 million US, imposes a severe fiscal constraint on the quantity that can be stockpiled. And in a protracted high-intensity conflict scenario, the rate of expenditure would likely outstrip the rate of replenishment, particularly if the U.S. industrial base is prioritized for its own forces. This economic reality creates an opening for the alternative philosophy represented by Queensland-based Hypersonix launch systems. Their approach, centered on the Spartan scramjet engine and the Dart AE airframe, leverages additive manufacturing and high-temperature composites to propose a radically different cost structure. The technological proposition offered by Hypersonix suggests a shift from the boutique, artisanal manufacturing of complex weaponry toward a model closer to mass production. By utilizing 3D printing techniques for the entire airframe and engine geometry, the production process eliminates thousands of moving parts and complex tooling requirements. This implies that, in a wartime contingency, production could theoretically be surged domestically, without relying on the shipment of castings or forgings from North America. If the projected cost per unit can indeed be driven below $2 million US, it fundamentally alters the calculus of deterrence. It allows for a strategy based on mass and saturation, rather than the precision delivery of a silver bullet asset that commanders might be hesitant to expend. Yet the transition from a successful prototype to a fielded capability represents the notorious Valley of Death in Australian defence industry policy. The Guided Weapons and Explosive Ordnance Enterprise, or GWEO, was established precisely to bridge this gap. Yet recent budgetary allocations indicate a continued preference for replenishing stocks with off-the-shelf foreign systems. This risk aversion appears structurally ingrained. Procurement agencies naturally gravitate toward low-risk, proven systems to ensure capability delivery, inadvertently starving domestic developmental programs of the capital required to reach maturity. The dilemma is that while the HACM exists today, the DART-AE is still proving its envelope. Choosing the former satisfies the immediate risk matrix, but exacerbates the long-term dependency risk. This dependency is not merely transactional, it is doctrinal. AUKUS Pillar 2 aims to foster interchangeability. While this enhances coalition interoperability, it also creates a pressure to standardize on U.S. designs. If the Australian Defence Force standardizes on the HACM interface and logistics footprint, the domestic hypersonic solution may struggle to find an integration pathway, regardless of its performance or cost advantages. The danger here is that Australia becomes a testing ground for allied technology, a vast laboratory at Woomera, without retaining the intellectual property or the industrial capacity to reproduce the effects generated on its own soil. Furthermore, the propulsion choice highlights a divergence in logistical footprints. The Hypersonix reliance on hydrogen fuel, while environmentally aligned, introduces a complex logistical tale regarding fuel storage. In contrast, traditional hydrocarbon-based systems fit seamlessly into existing fuel infrastructure. This operational constraint cannot be overlooked. The lethality of a weapon system is effectively zero if the logistical network cannot support its deployment. The strategic trade-off, therefore, is not a binary choice. It is a question of portfolio management within a constrained budget. The immense capital drain of the nuclear-powered submarine program leaves limited fiscal maneuvering room. Defense planners must weigh the value of a smaller number of highly capable imported missiles against the potential for a larger, domestically produced arsenal. An assessment of the current industrial trajectory suggests that a hybrid approach may be emerging, by necessity rather than design. The immediate security environment necessitates the acquisition of imported systems to provide a credible deterrent through the late 2000s. However, the sheer scale of the Indo-Pacific theater indicates that an imported-only strategy is likely unsustainable for a middle power. The true value of the domestic hypersonic program may not lie in replacing the HACM directly, but in providing an asymmetric, volume-based complement. Ultimately, the resolution of this tension will depend on whether the Australian Department of Defence views its role primarily as a purchaser of alliance capability, or as an incubator of national power. If the strategic priority remains strictly on interchangeability and risk minimization, the domestic sector risks relegation to a sub-tier supplier role. The outcome will be determined not by the aerodynamic performance of the vehicles testing over the red earth of Woomera, but by the willingness of policymakers to accept the short-term inefficiencies required to build a resilient, long-term industrial ecosystem.